What you are about to witness is, perhaps, the most chilling unsolved mystery of the 20th century. It took place in the winter of 1959, deep within the Soviet Union, on the unforgiving slopes of a peak known to the locals as Dead Mountain. When a rescue team finally located the campsite of 9 elite missing survivalists, the scene they uncovered defied all scientific logic. The group's large canvas tent was half buried in the blinding snow. Inside, all their heavy winter coats, boots, axes, and rations were perfectly arranged. But the heavy canvas of the tent had been violently slashed open, and the cuts were not made from the outside. The shelter had been cut open from the inside. Whatever happened in the dead of night, these 9 hardened hikers were so utterly terrified that they used survival knives to carve their way out of their only source of warmth. Outside, the searchers found 9 sets of footprints leading blindly into the freezing darkness. But the tracks made no sense. In the deadliest winter environment on Earth, at 30 degrees below zero, the footprints showed men running away wearing only socks or completely barefoot. What invisible terror drove 9 elite survivalists to leave their coats behind and run blindly towards certain death? To understand the sheer impossibility of this mystery, we must first understand the people involved. In the realm of true crime and wilderness disappearances, tragedies are often the result of human error. Amateurs making foolish mistakes, underestimating the environment, or packing the wrong gear. But the group that set out into the Ural Mountains in late January 1959 were not amateurs. They were elite. The expedition was organized by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Dyatlov was a highly respected outdoorsman, known for his meticulous planning, physical endurance, and calm demeanor under pressure. He assembled a team of 8 other individuals, 7 men and 2 women. Most of them were engineering students or recent graduates. They were all highly experienced, Grade 2 certified hikers with hundreds of miles of grueling winter treks under their belts. This specific expedition was designed to earn them their Grade 3 certification, the highest and most difficult rank available in the Soviet Union at the time. There was also a highly unusual addition to the group, a man named Alexander Zolotaryov. At 38 years old, he was significantly older than the rest of the students. He was a seasoned military veteran who had fought through the bloodiest, most brutal combat of World War II, surviving the Eastern Front. He was a tough, hardened combat instructor who had seen the absolute worst of human nature. This was a team built for survival. They were not easily frightened. Their objective was Mount Otorten, a grueling 200-mile trek through the desolate, freezing wilderness of the northern Urals. For the first week, the expedition went flawlessly. We know this because the group meticulously documented their journey. When their abandoned tent was eventually discovered, investigators found their diaries and several rolls of undeveloped film inside their cameras. The photographs recovered from those cameras show a group of young, incredibly fit, and happy individuals. They are seen smiling, setting up camp, joking with one another, and chopping wood. The diary entries describe the harsh cold and the deep snow, but the tone is always optimistic and professional. There is absolutely no hint of interpersonal conflict, no signs of distress, and no indication that they were being followed. On the afternoon of February 1st, the group began their ascent up the slopes of Dead Mountain. As the weather began to deteriorate and visibility dropped due to heavy snow squalls, Igor Dyatlov made a calculated, professional decision. Instead of pushing forward over the ridge or retreating down into the safety of the forested valley, he decided to set up camp right there on the exposed, open slope of the mountain. Many wilderness experts later theorized that Dyatlov made this choice deliberately. He wanted to test his team. He wanted to practice setting up a winter camp in an exposed, high-altitude environment to prepare them for even harsher expeditions in the future. As the sun set on February 1st, the temperature plummeted to minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. The group pitched their large canvas tent, anchored it securely into the deep snow, and climbed inside. They ate a dinner of cold rations, took a few final photographs of each other joking around in the dim light of their flashlights, and took off their heavy outer layers and boots to sleep. According to all the forensic evidence, everything was perfectly normal. But sometime after midnight, a localized hell broke loose on the slopes of Dead Mountain. Following the bizarre trail of barefoot tracks through the blinding snow, the Soviet search and rescue team descended the slope toward the dark tree line. The tracks ended near a massive old cedar tree at the edge of the forest, about a mile away from the slashed tent. Beneath the branches of this cedar tree, they made their first horrifying discovery. Beside the remains of a small, improvised campfire lay the frozen bodies of two hikers. They were stripped down to their underwear. They had no shoes. But what deeply disturbed the investigators was the cedar tree itself. The branches had been snapped off up to 15 feet high. The hands of the two dead men were rubbed completely raw, stripped of skin, and covered in blood. In the freezing darkness, these two men had desperately climbed the tree. They weren't looking for firewood. The forensic evidence suggested they were trying to look back up the slope toward their tent. They were trying to see if whatever had chased them out of their shelter was still there. A few hundred yards away, the searchers found 3 more bodies, including the expedition leader, Igor Dyatlov. Their bodies were spaced out along the path between the cedar tree and the tent. Their frozen postures told a tragic story. They had not died running away, they had died trying to crawl back up the mountain. Realizing they were freezing to death in the forest, Dyatlov and 2 others had attempted to fight their way back to the survival gear. The brutal minus 30-degree cold had stopped them in their tracks. At first glance, Soviet investigators assumed they had a simple, albeit tragic, case of hypothermia. The hikers had panicked, fled their tent, and frozen to death in the wilderness. But 4 hikers were still missing. It took 2 long, grueling months for the snow to melt enough for searchers to find the remaining members of the expedition. They were found buried under 13 feet of compacted snow in a steep ravine further deep into the woods. When the autopsies were performed on these last 4 bodies, the simple theory of hypothermia was violently shattered. The medical examiners were looking at injuries that defied the laws of physics. Alexander Zolotaryov, the hardened World War II veteran, and Lyudmila Dubinina, a 20-year-old student, had massive, catastrophic chest fractures. Their ribs were completely shattered. Another hiker, Nikolai Thibaut Brignoles, had a fatally crushed skull. The Soviet medical examiner, Dr. Boris Vozrojdeny, testified that the force required to cause such devastating internal damage was immense. He compared it to the blunt force trauma of being struck by a car moving at high speed, or the shockwave of a massive explosion. But here is the detail that turned the Dyatlov Pass from a tragedy into one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Despite their shattered skulls and crushed ribs, there was absolutely no external trauma. There were no cuts, no bruises, no scratches, and no soft tissue damage on the outside of their bodies. Whatever had crushed their bones had done so without breaking their skin. It was as if an invisible, localized pressure wave had simply squeezed them to death. The horror did not stop there. When examining Lyudmila Dubinina, the doctor noted a deeply unsettling anomaly. Her eyes were missing, and her tongue had been completely removed from its root. As if the physically impossible injuries were not enough, the Soviet investigators tested the clothing of the hikers found in the ravine. The Geiger counters went off. Several pieces of their clothing were emitting extraordinarily high levels of artificial radiation. Why would elite hikers in the remote Ural Mountains be wearing radioactive clothing? What could produce a shockwave powerful enough to crush a man's chest without bruising his skin? And why did 9 survivalists cut their way out of a warm tent to face certain death in the freezing darkness? The lead investigator compiled the horrifying evidence. He believed they were on the verge of uncovering something massive. But before the investigation could proceed any further, the full weight of the Soviet government came crashing down. High-ranking military officials from Moscow suddenly intervened. The case files were abruptly closed, sealed, and classified as top secret. The official Soviet conclusion was published in a few brief, incredibly vague sentences. The hikers died due to a compelling natural force. The area of Dead Mountain was entirely cordoned off. For the next 3 years, no hikers, hunters, or civilians were allowed anywhere near the Kholat Syakhl region. The KGB had buried the truth. When logic fails to explain the impossible, the human mind is forced to look into the shadows, and the shadows of Dead Mountain hold terrifying secrets. For centuries, the indigenous Mansi people of the Ural Mountains have avoided the slopes of Kholat Syakhl. In their ancient folklore, the mountain is not just a treacherous landscape, it is a cursed territory. It is the hunting ground of a creature they call the Menk, a towering, violent hominid cryptid, similar to the Yeti or Sasquatch. While Soviet investigators quickly dismissed local superstitions, the gruesome autopsy reports forced a terrifying question into the minds of the public. Ludmila Dubinina did not just freeze to death. Her eyes were gone, and her tongue had been physically removed by the root. Did the 9 elite survivalists cut their way out of their tent because they realized they were being hunted by something massive in the darkness? Did a predator of immense, unnatural strength crush their ribs and vanish into the snow without leaving a trace? But the mystery deepens even further, moving from ancient folklore to the terrifying realm of unacknowledged airspace. Decades after the incident, Lev Ivanov, the chief Soviet investigator who originally worked the case, made a shocking deathbed confession. He admitted that he was directly ordered by high-ranking KGB officials to remove critical witness testimonies from the official case file. The testimonies he was ordered to bury came from another group of hikers camped nearly 30 miles away from the Dyatlov group on that exact same night. In the early hours of February 2nd, the witnesses reported seeing bizarre, glowing orange orbs floating silently in the northern sky directly over Dead Mountain. They described the spheres moving in highly erratic, unnatural trajectories before disappearing into the clouds. Ivanov secretly believed that these glowing spheres were the true cause of the tragedy. This testimony aligns perfectly with the most chilling physical evidence found at the scene, the high levels of artificial radiation on the victim's clothing. In 1959, the Soviet Union was engaged in a desperate, highly classified arms race with the United States. Were the glowing orange spheres a top-secret radiological weapon? An experimental R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile that suffered a mid-air malfunction, showering the mountain in an invisible, deadly fallout? Or did Igor Dyatlov and his team witness an extraterrestrial anomaly so terrifying and so incomprehensible that it drove 9 hardened survivalists to sheer madness? The KGB sealed the mountain for 3 years, not to protect people from the weather, but to scour the site and retrieve classified debris before the world could find out. There is one final theory, a theory that perfectly bridges the gap between science and absolute terror. It suggests that the killer was not a monster, not a Soviet bomb, and not a flying saucer. The killer was the mountain itself. Modern physicists have proposed a phenomenon known as a von Karman vortex street. Under very specific, rare aerodynamic conditions, the dome-like shape of Dead Mountain acts like an airplane wing. As the brutal, freezing winds slam into the peak, they are transformed into miniature, swirling tornadoes that sweep down the slopes. But these tornadoes do not just move snow, they generate sound. Specifically, they generate infrasound. Infrasound is an acoustic wave operating below 20 Hz. It is completely inaudible to the human ear, but it is not imperceptible to the human body. When a person is exposed to infrasound at exactly 7 Hz, the frequency violently resonates with the human brain and internal organs. Military experiments have shown that exposure to this specific, invisible frequency causes sudden, overwhelming physiological panic. It induces a feeling of profound sorrow, sheer terror, and the absolute certainty that you are about to die. Prolonged exposure can even cause severe visual hallucinations. Imagine waking up in the pitch black of a frozen tent. You cannot hear anything over the howling wind, but suddenly, an invisible, crushing weight presses against your mind. An overwhelming, primitive terror takes control of your nervous system. Your brain screams that if you do not escape the tent immediately, you will die. Driven by uncontrollable infrasonic madness, the hikers slashed the canvas and ran into the freezing night, hallucinating and terrified of an enemy that wasn't even there. But while the infrasound theory explains the panic, it cannot explain the physical trauma. An acoustic wave does not shatter a man's skull. It does not crush the ribs of a seasoned military veteran with the force of a high-speed car crash. And it certainly does not leave traces of radiation on winter clothing. The paradox remains. To this day, the Dyatlov Pass Incident stands as a monument to the unknown. 9 elite survivalists went up the mountain, and 9 battered, broken bodies came down. Whether they were the victims of a military cover-up, an invisible frequency, an ancient predator, or an encounter with something not of this world, the absolute truth remains frozen under the snow of Kolatsiakhl. Now, we turn the investigation over to you. When you look at the impossible injuries, the glowing orbs in the sky, and the violent escape from the tent, what do you believe really happened on Dead Mountain in 1959? Is there a logical scientific explanation, or did they encounter something completely beyond human understanding? We highly value your perspective, so please let us know your theories in the comments section below. If you appreciate these deep dives into the world's most chilling classified files and unsolved anomalies, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the Discovery Vault. Your continued support allows us to keep manufacturing these high-quality historical investigations for you. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, some vaults are better left unopened. We will see you inside the next case file.